Hi, everybody. This is Benetta from St. Louis.
Aneta?
Yes.
Okay.
And Brenda too.
Okay, who are Brenda?
Uhuru. Uhuru, Diane, just joined.
Okay.
Morning.
Okay. All right, let me say the names that I have, and if I don't call your name, you gotta call me. I mean, you tell me who you are. I have Mensa, Janice, Sadie, Michaela, Ruby, Lisa, Ladoja, Ann, Maureen, Akinya, Ali, Angela, Kabaka, Ona, Kiono, Stephanie, Tiffany, P, Day, Andre, Kitty, K. Finn, Aisha, David, Life, Star, Angelica, Elizabeth, Aneta, Brenda. Abraham.
All right. Morning. Yeah, Kino.
Kino, yes.
This is Unique.
Unique, I got Unique. I thought I did have.
No, yeah, that was somebody else.
Okay.
That was
Sean.
Sean.
The person who you're trying to reach.
Somebody just came on?
Aaron.
Aaron?
Okay. Well, press 1 to put on mute. Oh, okay.
The wages is on too, right?
no.
No?
I'm gonna stop paying.
Did anybody just come on?
YouTube is live.
Oh, this is real lucky.
Will? Okay, it's 8:07. So we're gonna ask everybody to mute, or we gotta mute from here? And whoever knows how to do that should do
The stop 5.
We don't want to mess up anything.
Just want to let everybody know that you can watch this on YouTube live at YouTube. I mean, Uhuru TV on YouTube. The one word, Uhuru TV.
Why would they ask him to do that?
It's another experience.
I just wanna make sure.
Okay. Uhuru Comrades.
Is that Uhuru TV?
Uhuru TV.
UhuruTV.org or what?
No, Uhuru TV on YouTube. So just go to YouTube, type in Uhuru TV, and then click on the Uhuru logo.
You checking it to see the
I
start
just wanna
time?
make sure it's done.
Uhuru Comrades, I want to just go ahead and appreciate everybody's coming on. We're using different means to communicate with you in this political education that we're doing. I just want to remind everybody that the political education that we're involved in should be distinguished from the kinds of events that many people have become accustomed to in this last period. It is not simply about the accumulation of information, but this is a political education that's being done by the African People's Socialist Party. The purpose is to deepen the political understanding of the ideological development of members of our party and others who we want to bring into our party a closer relationship to the party. The point that I'm making is that our objective is not simply to explain the world, but to change it. We are a part of a
All
revolution.
callers are muted and they can unmute themselves.
We are a part of a revolutionary project. Our objective is to capture power over our own lives. The thing that I would also want to help everybody to understand is that we in the African People's Socialist Party concluded a long time ago that a primary aspect of the struggle of our people is to end forever the foreign and alien domination of African people. That we are absolutely unequivocally opposed to any foreign alien domination of African people. That is something that we will not tolerate under any name. You can call it integration, you can call it diversification, you can call it by any other name. The fact is that African people have been denied a right to be a self-determining, self-governing people, a thing that has impacted every aspect of our lives for more than 500 years, whether it is on the continent of Africa or the various places that we've been forced subsequent to our enslavement and colonization. And other people who are Black people in various places around the world, whether that is in places like India or places in the Pacific, have experienced the same consequences as a consequence of being Blacks, because Black now has been something that is always associated with inferiority and oppression. So we are absolutely opposed to that. We are not engaged in some kind of discussion that's going to help you make better arguments in the barbershop or to be outstanding student in your Black history classes or something to that effect. The thing is that we want to arm a generation of people that's coming into political life finally, to be able to finally change the conditions of existence for African people as an enslaved and colonized population. That's what it's about. That's why we are here today. So another thing I would mention to you is that while we really want to have discussions around the ideas and things that we're talking about, this is not a debate that would offer up some struggles around the political line of the African People's Socialist Party and some other kind of politic. The point is that the African People's Socialist Party does have a specific political line. We expose and reveal that to you every day in these studies, but we do it 1,000 other ways too, including in our newspapers and our online mediums as well. So there's ample opportunity in those processes to debate the African internationalism, but that's not what this is for. This is to deepen the understanding of people here with the philosophy, the ideology, the politic of the party, of the African People's Socialist Party. So I just wanted to be clear on that. We're going to be discussing today the whole question of the campaign and that we have initiated in the Africans Charge Genocide. It is a process that we've taken to the United Nations, a campaign that deals with the conditions that African people are confronted with here and around the world, but essentially here within the United States. We have sent materials to everyone that, particularly the petition that we have worked on to go to the United Nations itself, but also we have sent out a link to Reparations Now, which is the book that was published by the African People's Socialist Party immediately, shortly after the 1982 World Tribunal on Reparations for African People that we initiated in Brooklyn, New York, and again in 1982. And we think it's important for you to take a look at that because many times most people who are coming into political life are starting at ground zero. They're starting at being smacked in the face or in the brain by a current situation that stems from immediately the uprisings in Ferguson in 2014. Others who have tried to understand this situation have gone back and looked at particular snapshots in history and seen that this happened at that time, this happened at that time, but not necessarily understanding an historical continuum. The African People's Socialist Party has been engaged in this struggle directly for 43 years. And before that, we were part of the Civil Rights and Black Power movement. That is to say, our existence even began before the emergence of the African People's Socialist Party itself in 1972. So we want to be able to have you see a continuum, to understand where we are now, not just as a snapshot, but as a part of an unfolding of history that has come about as a consequence of the struggles of our people. Our people have been engaged in incredible struggle against white power imperialism that dates back 600 years when Portugal first came to Africa and began the process of kidnapping our people and forcing us to into what has come to be known as slavery. We have been dispersed throughout the world. We have lived under the cruelest kinds of conditions that have become so ubiquitous that it's normal, so that people are not even easily upset, even Africans ourselves, when the worst kinds of things happen to us, because there has never been a time in the last 500-600 years where we have not experienced these things happening to us. The whole idea of African self-determination, African self-government, is foreign to most Black people, and therefore it is difficult for us to wrap our brains around that reality. We know bad things happen to us, but the idea that African people should be in charge of our own affairs is something that's very difficult in many instances for African people to understand and sometimes to even accept. The narrative, how the world is explained, the whole world is explained. Everything that we know that occurs in the world today, how it's explained, it comes from the brains, the lenses, the interpretation of white power, whether that's in China, whether that, and even sometimes for the Chinese people, that is reality too, because the current existence of everybody on the planet Earth is under capitalist domination, a world system. Capitalism is not just something that emerged and occurred in Manhattan or Manchester. It is something that emerged as a world system. It came into existence through slavery, through the captivity of African people and our dispersal around the world, and also through colonialism, the domination of whole peoples everywhere around the world. There was no such thing as capitalism before slavery, before Europe stretched out and began to kidnap and take people's lands and countries all around the world. Before that, it was just starving, poor white people who were fighting off disease and fighting each other on a regular basis. Now, with the capture of the whole world, the whole new world economy comes into existence. Whereas before there was simply a Chinese economy and the various kinds of political economies that might have existed on the continent of Africa, where the indigenous people who lived on this land had their own economic life, their own independent economic activity, where people in India had their own economic lives in the Pacific region. That doesn't exist anymore. It hasn't existed since the emergence of white power capitalism, and capitalism came about as a world economy. It linked and locked the world up into a single economic process, and it is where you find the emergence of white power as an historical phenomenon. So that's the reality of it, and you cannot have this kind of situation without the most brutal, horrible, vulgar kinds of oppression and brutality imposed on people. Nobody will automatically and easily give up their freedoms, give up their futures, give up their children without the worst kind of brutality. And there's also been an assault even on the brains, the minds of people. So those who control the economy, who control the political life of the world, have also been able to capture most of the knowledge of the world and possess that as their own, even though it's been stolen from various other peoples around the world, have been able to appropriate our culture and claim it as their own. And after having treated it with a horrible slander and vicious assault, and so that it's no longer something that even the people from whence it came want to be associated anymore, then it's appropriated by the oppressors and becomes their culture. It becomes their reality. And the whole world has been defined in that fashion. I just think it's really important for us to understand that, because generally speaking, it's difficult, as I mentioned earlier, for African people to understand our right and responsibility to determine our own future, to be in control of our own lives, independent of any external force, and to even trust ourselves, to trust our own judgment, to trust our own definitions. We always have to refer back to the definition of the oppressors, and with the assumption that the oppressor gives us, that these are innocent definitions, that they're somehow objective and above human interest, that this is just the way things are, when the fact of the matter is that our oppressor has defined the world in a fashion that benefits the oppressor and that maintains our oppression. I just wanted to say that, because we're going to be dealing with some questions now that's really important. And we're talking about a generation of African people who are just coming into political life and must necessarily assume responsibility for the future, for this reality that we're confronted with now, and for the future, and must be prepared to dismiss, discard anything that does not serve the interests of our people and our freedom. So what I want to do is that, as I mentioned, we've offered up for this study the NPDUM petition to the United Nations on the crime of genocide against African people in the United States of America. We have initiated a petition. We'll look at that petition. We have offered up also, as a reference, excerpts from Reparations Now, which is an abbreviated report from the International of the World Tribunal on Reparations for Black People in the United States. This is a tribunal that our party initiated in 1982, because we think, again, it's important to provide a kind of history and a kind of history and political education. And we're trying to do this in relatively condensed form. It shouldn't be necessary for anybody to have to go back and then try to rediscover this history. White people don't have to do that generally to understand their reality, but the assaults on us, on our people, has been so vicious that they even burn the books, remove the history, so that it's always starting over again. That's what it appears to be. Our revolutionary movements don't have an opportunity to generally last long enough to achieve a certain kind of maturity and experience. And the African People's Socialist Party is different from that, in that we have survived with 43 years. And so we're presenting to you this political work that we're involved in as part of a continuum. And so we'll be referencing Reparations Now. We won't try to go through this book, but I'm suggesting you have access to this. You should read this. There's a lot of important stuff in this book. And the other thing I'm going to mention is that we're talking about a petition that's been taken to the United Nations. We have no illusions about the United Nations. The United Nations is just like the United States. It is an institution that represents the interests of the class that's in power. The United Nations, when the United Nations was created, we're talking about the UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. But what must be said is that most of what we refer to as international law was created at a time when mostly white people had power. these are laws, generally speaking, that were created by white people while Africans were enduring the worst kind of colonial terror and violence. Not just in Africa, the continent. In the African continent, there were only two nominally free countries when the so-called United Nations was founded, and that was Ethiopia and Liberia. And Liberia was created by white people in the United States, named for the capital, named for a white man in the United States. The money used is white money from the United States. The flag is the color of the white flag of the United States. So I mean, so they said Liberia and Ethiopia were the only independent countries, African countries, but even that's illusory because how can one country in Africa be independent when everything else is enslaved? There can't be, it's not independent as a consequence of any relationship with black people. I mean, so that's the point that I'm making, however, is that international law, most of it was created when African people and the rest of us were enslaved. It was the law created by the white man for the white man and of the white man. That was in 1945. The United Nations was created, and it was created as a follow-up to the failed League of Nations, which was created around 1919, 1920. And the League of Nations is something that came immediately after the first imperialist war. And a consequence of what they call the Versailles Treaty, the treaty that was forged to end that war. And the League of Nations was an institution that was created to moderate the relationship between white civilized colonial powers, to moderate their relationship, to make it unnecessary for them to have to fight each other in order to control the rest of us around the world, which is what every imperialist war, every war has been about, a war to redivide the world among the gangster white thugs that dominated the world. The United Nations is the same thing. It was created as a mechanism and an institution so there could be non-violent struggle between the sectors of the white imperialist powers over control of the rest of us, and a means by which they would moderate how that struggle would occur, and also the treatment of the natives who were colonized in order to minimize struggles and things like that, and make sure that they had a permanent guarantee on the utilization of black lives and black labor and black resources and other resources in order to maintain their own imperial regimes. For example, one of the big struggles that happened, say, with the League of Nations between the white powers was the question of their involvement in international affairs. And France was directly opposed to that notion because France needed African soldiers to fight in the wars for France. And so that was changed. And so you had a League of Nations that had mandates and things like that that were based on the needs of the oppressor nations, oppressor countries, and not on the oppressed ourselves. In fact, those of us who are familiar with the war that France made against the people of Vietnam, the courageous and heroic people of Vietnam, also know that when France fought the Vietnamese people, that 71% of the troops that were used by France to kill Vietnamese were colonized people. They were people from North Africa, they were people from West Africa, etc., who were fighting, who were colonized, who were fighting against other colonized people. So the point is that the League of Nations, United Nations, they were not created to serve us at all. Laws are created to serve the interests of ruling classes. And the only time there seemed to have been some kind of dramatic changes in how laws were written at the United Nations were during the period of the anti-colonial struggles and the post-colonial situation where some newly independent countries were coming into the United Nations, and that gave them an opportunity to impact in some of these committees and conferences and on what some of the laws would look like. But again, it has been laws that were created essentially by the rulers, for the rulers. And even when we look at the UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, we are talking about something that was created by white people, again, to moderate how wars and the treatment of people should occur. And it was something that was created to prevent white people from treating other white people the way the white colonizers have treated those of us historically. The question of genocide is brought into the public political arena in the 1940s. By the 1940s, Belgium had murdered 10 to 12 million Africans in Congo alone. The Germans in 1904, between 1904 and 1907, had murdered 500,000 Africans in what they call Southwest Africa. And so all of this stuff is going to cost. They've almost disappeared the indigenous people. More than maybe 200 million African people died in the process of enslaving us. But the question of genocide never meets the political arena until the 1940s. And even then, when they're talking about genocide, they do not go back and use as an example the genocide created by the same Germans, right, against African people in Southwest Africa. So my point is that if you ain't got the power, you don't define it, they define it, and the ones who have the power are usually the ones who are the oppressors. And so I think it's really important for us to understand this. And even the Polish Jew, Lemke, I can't remember, Frenchard was his name, I can't remember his first name, but the Polish Jew Lemke, who wrote and actually lobbied the United Nations to get this definition of genocide adopted, in this convention, well, he said explicitly that the genocide had nothing to do with Africans in this country. He was opposed to using this definition of genocide to apply to African people. I just think it's really important for us to understand that, and that tells us a number of things. One thing that tells us is that law is the opinion of the ruling class, and it's been the white people who've been the rulers of this world for the longest period of time. And so I think it's really important for us to recognize that. And the ones who got the guns make the laws. Generally speaking, that's how it has always been. And that law is something that's important to us only as a political tool that we use to expose the contradictions that exist between the oppressed and the oppressors for the purpose of our people winning the power to make our own laws, to judge our own relationships among ourselves and with the rest of the world. That's the acquisition of state power. And the reparations now book that we were using is something that came out of a tribunal that was organized by the African People's Socialist Party in 1982 on this trek that we have to win masses of African people to be involved in the capture of state power for ourselves. And what is the state? We talk about state power, talking about black power. It's not some abstract thing. Black power is control of the state, our own state. And in the absence of our own state, the power of the people to impact on what the oppressor state can do to us and to drive toward the acquisition of state power. What is the state? The state is that bureaucracy that has as its command and in its possession the police, the prisons, the courts, the military, all these institutions of coercion. And we don't have it, and they got it, but we have the power of the people when exercised in an appropriate way can function. Because when we talk about the state anyway, we're talking about the proletariat, we're talking about the working class, workers' state, we're talking about being able to control the state. And one of the most important things of the African People's Socialist Party that makes this demand for reparations different from any that has preceded it is that it is in the hands of the African working class. When we saw these Africans who are many of whom are on this call today, in this study today, leave, go in Jackson, Mississippi, and from Jackson, Mississippi, go to Chicago, and then from Chicago to the various other places we went, pushing this reparations demand. What we saw was the African working class speaking for itself. So it wasn't a whole bunch of politicians and other things. We are intervening in history as a class that represents the oppressed nation of African people, and that's the power of this movement right now. The masses have to assume the power to capture the political power that we have to have as a people. So I know that's a long intro, but I feel like it was necessary. So I want to just read briefly. The first thing I want to do is read from the introduction of reparations now. And again, well, the introduction speaks for itself. On November 13th, everyone should have access to this. If you haven't looked at your website or your email overnight, you may not realize it, but this is there. And so I will begin reading. On November 13, 1982, a two-day World Tribunal on Reparations for Black people in the U.S. was held in New York City. This is important because for us, the reparations demand has to be a demand of the people. And if it's not, they can make it disappear, just like they made other reparations, other genocide demands that were taken before the United Nations. This is not the first time this demand was taken before the United Nations. It was impactful, even though it was the Communist Party USA that used something called the Civil Rights Commission to do it in the early 1950s. It was impactful, but it soon disappeared off the world stage as a political phenomenon. And because in that instance, as impactful as it was only a certain kind of political elites, even if we talk about within organizations of struggle that were aware of the reparations demand, one. Two, it was done by forces that really expected the United Nations to offer some kind of resolution to the contradiction. And if the United Nations didn't do it, then what, right? Here we have struggling to build the reparations, the genocide petition, taking it to the masses of African people ourselves, so the people become the custodians of this movement. And the thing that's related to that is that we see this again as an instrument that we can use to rally our people, to rally public support for a revolution so that African people can take control of our own lives. And the law, in terms of the convention, offers us an opportunity to be able to raise up the contradictions that exist between the United States and African people in this country. And it helps to contextualize what the United States is doing in places like Afghanistan, what the United States is doing in Iraq and other places around the world. It's doing, it started here. And so no one should be surprised about what it's doing in the other places. On November 13, 1982, a two-day World Tribunal on Reparations for Black people in the U.S. was held in New York City. The full significance of that tribunal will ultimately be summed up in history by the process of Black struggle, which continues to unfold and which will itself be influenced by the tribunal. Such struggle as that which will be generated by the demand for reparations being generalized within the oppressed and colonized African community in the U.S. Such struggle as that which will be influenced by the development and leadership of the African National Reparations Organization, founded on the 2 days immediately following the World Tribunal. And such struggle as that which will occur under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, the advanced forces of the colonized African working class in the U.S. However, while we must leave much to history's judgment as to the full significance of the World Tribunal, there are some things which we can say today, such a short time after the occurrence of the World Tribunal. One thing the World Tribunal did was to establish a process wherein the issue of the oppression of African people in the U.S. will have to be taken seriously again by the international community. It is hard to believe that within the short period of 10 or 11 years, the plight and just cause of the domestically colonized African community in the U.S. has receded from the active consciousness of the peoples of the world. Let's think about this. This is 1982. So throughout the whole 1960s and up until the early 1970s, the world saw the struggle of Black people, 50s, 60s. I mean, we were a critical component of the whole struggle, and everybody in the world recognized that the United States was oppressing Black people, killing Black people, murdering Black people, black people had no right. You're talking about stuff like apartheid. It started in the United States. And the world recognized that at that time. Yet by 1982, when we're doing this, it's off the agenda. Nobody is paying any attention to it. Nobody's conscious of it. And partially because they've killed the revolutionary forces, and we're not in place as a revolutionary movement in this country to advance our own interests. And others were now speaking for us or claiming to speak for us, and now have decided that our struggle was no longer for liberation, but for some other thing, or that we had been successfully integrated into the American dream. It was not so long ago that the heroic cause of our people was recognized worldwide, that the courage of our militants and revolutionaries was world renowned. Because of their prominent roles in providing leadership for our people against our most formidable enemy and oppressor, Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King, the leadership of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and the Black Panther Party traveled the world with other great international figures who sought the end of human oppression and the creation of just social systems. These were the heady days of worldwide mobilization, the days of Che, Ho Chi Minh, Mao, and the Cultural Revolution. These were the days of the Tupamaras, of Cabral, of Black Power and Black Panthers. Much has changed since that time. One of the most significant things to happen was the brutal suppression of our movement. Such vicious military suppression as that which evinced the murders of Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, Mark Clark, and tens of members of the Black Panther Party, along with those from less influential organizations throughout the US, such as Lawrence Mann, who was the co-founder of the African People's Socialist Party. This suppression resulted in forced exile for many and frame-ups and imprisonments for many more. Today, it may be argued that more of our militants and revolutionaries languish behind prison walls than among us within the colonized African communities of the US. Geronimo Pratt, Sundiata Acoli, Herman Bell, Albert Washington, Dhoruba Moore, who is now Dhoruba Ben Wahad, Anthony Laborde, James York, Bernice Jones, et cetera, are no longer on the streets of the US. Assata Shakur, free only because of a daring prison escape, is hunted like an animal throughout the US by officers of the US colonial state who surely intend to end her life as they have attempted to do in the past. Subsequent to this brutal attack on our movement and its leaders, the US government has worked diligently to convince the world community of its changed character as it relates to Black people, a changed character which the US government alleges has resulted in the Americanization of its African population, which has now achieved its basic aspirations. To do so was not as difficult as some might think. As a result of the terror and carnage strewn throughout our oppressed colonized communities, resulting in the imprisonment and murder of our leaders and the destruction of our militant organizations, our people were temporarily pacified, their voices stilled, and the US government and the international community were relieved of the terrible din caused by 40 million African people who were demanding bread, peace, and Black power. And if the quiet which now prevailed within our communities was not enough to convince the peoples of the world that Black people had become finally free and no longer needed to rise up in opposition to the US government, several other ploys succeeded in quelling any suspicion. One ploy was dependent on the election of James Earl Carter as US president in 1976. Carter's election was one which saw more than 90% of the Black vote go to a plantation owner from the Deep South, which was the immediate origin of the Black movement so recently crushed by the United States government. Was this not evidence of a reconciliation between the interests of the Black population and the United States government? If not, Carter's selection of Andrew Young as US ambassador to the United Nations surely served the purpose. Thus, the world community was misled, as were our own nearly leaderless people. But no longer. The World Tribunal not only exposes to the international community that the oppression of African people is alive and well in the US, it also exposes the fact that our oppression has existed along one long continuum, that there has never been any cessation of our oppression. This is one significance of the World Tribunal, but not the only one. Another significance of the World Tribunal was the process it initiated in summing up our history and oppression and struggle for African people ourselves, who are the victims of our oppression. Now the victims of US terror within and without its borders can be better armed in our attempts to overthrow this terror. This pamphlet represents only a tiny portion of the testimony and documentation presented to the World Tribunal on reparations for Black people in the United States. The entire tribunal proceedings will be published in the immediate near future. However, even this inadequate representation of the World Tribunal should serve to alert the reader to the historical significance of the World Tribunal. The precedents provided by the tribunal will have an impact on people's struggle for years to come. For the first time in its history, the US government has been put on trial for its crimes against Black people by Black people ourselves. Moreover, the World Tribunal on Reparations for Black people in the US established precedents in international law, which has previously been treated as the sole property of those with the benefit of state power. That is, international law up to this tribunal was treated as something that only benefited those who had state power. Finally, the World Tribunal took the concept of law and raised it as having significance for those other than the propertied class. The tribunal smashed the bourgeois concept of one justice for all peoples and classes and raised the truth that the justice of the oppressed will result in the destruction of the justice of the oppressor, a justice which legitimized oppression. The World Tribunal occurred as an initiative of the African People's Socialist Party, an organization of Black workers by ideology and actual composition. Therefore, we can correctly say that the World Tribunal was an initiative of the African working class itself. The fact that 94% of the African population in the US belongs to the Black working class, whose heroism has only been recently forgotten, will soon provide the most magnificent testimony of the significance of the World Tribunal on reparations for Black people in the US throughout the streets of this United States of America, whose very wealth and very existence has come at the expense of the life, liberty, and well-being of millions of African people. So that's the introduction to this. And I'm hoping that people will read this and read it all. Read the indictment that we laid out to this World Tribunal. I function in the World Tribunal on reparations as the people's advocate. And you should read the indictment that was made. Also, what I would like to do now, before we turn it over to you, is just look at the petition that's being presented here to the United Nations. Now, this is really a kind of abbreviated petition, because finally this petition is going to be hundreds of pages long, because it's going to have to be able to show the extent of the oppression and brutality, the genocide that the United States government has imposed on African people. And this doesn't even begin to get to the tip of the iceberg. It's just something that lets people know that something horrible happened to us, but the actual petition is going to have to be hundreds of pages long. And I'm saying this because I'm hoping that Jordan Geiger, who is going to be leading this campaign, this committee, would be aware of this, and there are people who will be working with him to actually document the hundreds and hundreds and thousands of cases of brutality, murder, imprisonment, the whole host of things that have contributed to genocide against African people. The other thing is, I don't think we can accurately do this without, and we make some mention of it here, but it's going to have to really be clear that the genocide of African people did not begin on these shores, that we are on these shores as a consequence of genocide against African people on the continent of Africa itself. That's got to be crystal clear, because that's the only thing that can explain the reality of African people worldwide. It takes us from this place of having in every location we are, explaining our conditions as somehow peculiar to the location, as opposed to being irresponsive to the initial assault on African people, the thing that Karl Marx referred to as the original sin. And the original sin was the assault on Africa itself. And the original sin is an assault that left the African people worldwide not conscious of a culture, not conscious of connection to each other, something that not even conscious of our relatives, etc. This is the original sin. And I think that this is something that we're going to have to say. And the thing that complicates that a little bit for some people, in the minds of some people, is the acceptance of the narrative that has been imposed on us by white power imperialism, that would suggest to us that there is no such thing as an African nation, that there's just these different places, that Africa is not a country, it's a continent, and Europe is not a continent, it's peninsula. But it doesn't, I mean, it's depending on whose definitions that you want to use, and we're using our own definitions. How we know we're Africans? We're Africans because we feel like we're Africans, right? Yeah. We're Africans because we say we're Africans, among other things. So anyway, the opening statement to the petition. This is a petition to the United Nations. This is NPDUM, petition to the United Nations on the crime of genocide against African people in the United States of America. The opening statement: we, the undersigned, charge that the United States government has historically committed the crime of genocide against African people inside its borders and continues to do so today, often with the complicity of many U.S. citizens. I think we can say often with the complicity of U.S. citizens. It is in the interest of all freedom-loving peoples worldwide to unite with African people, colonized within the borders of the United States, in our struggle for our basic human rights of freedom from state-imposed violence and oppression, and for self-determination and liberation with economic and political control over our lives and communities. The existence of violence, terror, and mass murders sanctioned by the U.S. government inside this country is the template for predatory U.S. wars of occupation around the world. It is our duty to present to the world community compelling evidence documenting the U.S. and European colonial genocide as defined by the United Nations. This long-standing assault on the African nation began with the invasions of Africa and the kidnapping and enslavement of African people, persisting in various forms through the centuries up until the present time. This violence and assault on Africans as a people and the theft of our independence, happiness, labor, and resources is the very foundation of the wealth and power of the U.S. and Europe today. I want to say this, just looking at this particular sentence paragraph. This violence on and assault on Africans as a people and the theft of our independence, happiness, labor, and resources. I mean, that's what happened. You know, our independence, happiness, labor, and resources were stolen. That's really important for us to understand, because the narrative that's been created by the imperialists is that they rescued us. Mm-hmm. They rescued us. And that's why we were living in savagery and barbarism until white people came and took us into slavery and stuck us on these cruel ships that where many lives were just wasted and thrown away, where families were disrupted, where whole new countries were created. And this is our freedom, our happiness, our independence, our future, our culture. All of this was assaulted by them, and they claim that they rescued us. I just think it's, and we have been taught that. Yeah. You know, we've been taught that in schools. As a young man, I actually remember telling a white man I was glad slavery happened, because otherwise I would have been left in barbaric Africa with the monkeys and things like this. And this is what they have convinced African people are, and they've convinced the world of this reality as well. And we contribute to an ongoing belief in that by not fighting to be a free and independent people, instead trying to be one with the slave master. I mean, to have a movement of slaves, and our only objective is to try to get as close to the slave master as we can. That is the most ridiculous, and that's evidence. Yep, there's something wrong with those people, all right, right? We make it clear that the genocide against African people in the U.S. takes place on land stolen from the indigenous people, who have also faced the most treacherous genocide at the hand of the United States government and citizenry, and who are relegated to impoverished reservations where their life existence is in the 40s. And we have to say, even when we talk about the indigenous people here, that was Europe that assaulted this land. That was Europe that killed the indigenous people. That was Europe that stuck them in concentration camps that's called reservations. It's really important to understand that, because Europeans are not indigenous to this land. And we treat it like they're indigenous here, like we'll give them something. They can have, what do you call these places where you can go and gamble? They can have a casino over there, see how well they're doing. This is the kind of nonsense that comes into play in terms of even the consciousness of most people who think they know something about this reality here. We would show that despite the heroic struggles of African people for our civil and constitutional rights, and this should say for civil and constitutional rights, not ours. During the 1960s, African people exist today under conditions in which the U.S. state power, not powers, not only failed to protect our health and well-being as expected under full citizenship, but continually inflicts state or state-supported violence and terror on us. The U.S. government, and it's really important, because here we are in 2016, all around this country, white people and policemen are killing black people. White people, sometimes in police uniforms, are killing black people. And in every instance, we got to act like we got to find out if it really was an attempt to kill black people, as though, this is crazy. Don't you understand there's something really insane about that you have to say, okay, let's look at it. No, did he really have a gun in his hand? Like, did the video, was that really a gun? This kind of nonsense. When we're in this situation in the first place because somebody came and kidnapped us, and everything that we've done has been held in suspicion, and they have the right to suspect us because we are trying like hell. Even if we don't know how we got here, we know something wrong with this relationship, and all the time Africans are trying to break free of it. And so, this is the insanity that we find ourselves being confronted with, and that's why we say people who run around talking about the way out is to vote for Hillary, for this other person, it's madness. U.S. government is responsible for mass murders, mass and discriminatory imprisonment and oppressive conditions in nearly every aspect of life, including education, family life, reproduction, employment, healthcare, and freedom of political assembly for African people in the United States. Although millions of African people perished on the slave ships in the journey from Africa to the Americas, and though millions of African people were slaughtered by European and American colonizers throughout Africa, and hundreds of millions of indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere were murdered by Europeans, it is notable that the word genocide did not exist in the English lexicon until its coinage in 1944 in response to the Nazi government's mass murder of European Jewry. And this was a definition of convenience, political convenience. And you can tell that just how the question is treated today. The fact is that the Jews were in Europe, and I want to make a distinction. The Jews in Europe, as opposed to Jews in the Middle East and where where Jews originated, the Jews in Europe were being killed, discriminated, oppressed by white people. In fact, when the slaughter was happening in Germany, the U.S. government actually had a law that prohibited Jews from being able to come to the United States. I mean, that was the reality. Now you look at a situation where is justice for the Jews being exacted according to the narrative. It's not against the Germans. It's not against the Americans who wouldn't let the Jews come here and made it necessary for Jews to change their last names in order to be able to be employed and couldn't even go to certain kinds of clubs and things like that. It's the damn Palestinians. It's the Arabs who are now being defined as some kind of Nazis, etc., which is ridiculous in its face. Point being, it's political. It was political then, it's political now. So we say this petition recognizes that the term genocide, and certainly we should say the definition of genocide, is applicable to Africans in the US for the conditions we face historically and today. And that's what we're doing with it. It's political then, it's political now. We take this term genocide that they put forth for their own benefit, not for us. And then we raise it up to show the contradiction. This is law. And by the way, this is something that should be understood, that this is law, this is international law. International law supersedes, is that the word I want to use, prevails over national law, in theory. In theory. That's how the US can go and invade some other country because they violated what is international law. That's why I say the guns, who got the guns determine what the law is and what law is going to be united with. And I say this is really important because there are some people who are even today who travel with the United Nations tour that they just did of experts, what do you call it, working group of experts on people of African descent. There are people who actually believe that if we can just make the United States live up to the law, everything will be cool. I mean, there are people who really, really, really believe that, who debate that. You heard it when we were at the Black is Back coalition thing, where somebody stood up and said, the reason you can't do this is because you can't get it under international law unless you're this and that. Well, the ones with the guns make international law. They're not subjugated by international law. They're the ones who make international law. And the thing is that international law applies to you only if the oppressor states and nations find it convenient for that to be the case. And I think that's really important for us to understand. We ain't doing it because we think the United Nations don't give us anything. We're doing it because we think that the people have the power to make this determination, and then we're involved in a struggle to take political power over our own lives. Black power has to prevail. So here's where we go. International law governing the crime of genocide and human. But this doesn't mean that it's not convenient for us at different times to use the international law. Because there are other people and states. There are states now that are engaged, and that's what you must understand also, like all this international law revolves around the agreement of consenting states. That's what I think the point that the person from the Black Agenda report at the Black is Back coalition was trying to make. These are laws that depend upon the unity of consenting states. And there are states now that one of the reasons that we are engaged in a particular kind of activity is because there are states in contention with the United States. Russia, right? Iran, which one? Venezuela, other states, they're in contention. How do we then create a condition and then arm these forces with the ability to affect international law, to give us space and be able to unite with us in the struggle that we have to make for our freedom? And that's not going to happen just because they know we're being mistreated, because they're not going to stick their necks out for us dealing with the most powerful oppressive government in the world just because we're being mistreated. They've known this all along. The thing that's going to make the difference is if we build our own movement of power so that they're uniting with us, right? can really be meaningful in that we can make some things happen on this end that can help them on their end. I don't know if I'm clear on that or not. But they're not going to do it just because they know we got to build a revolutionary movement. Then it's like we've said all along that we talk about reparations. You can't win this in the court unless you got an army in the streets. If you got an army in the streets, you go before the judge look out the window, see an army in the streets and say, damn right, they need reparations. And what I'm saying is that we have to create that kind of movement here on the ground in this country. And that's why it's so important for us to challenge this narrative of hands up, don't shoot, Black Lives Matter, and then make the demands for our freedom so that the world can see this and then be able to unite with us in their own contest with the United States. They're not going to stick their necks out unless they know a consequence can be delivered inside the United States by a powerful movement of African people who are struggling in our own interests. You with me on that? It's a political question. It ain't no moral question. People like us and stuff like that, but that ain't going to be enough for them to take a chance that's going to risk their ability to feed their own children just because they like us. We're going to have to be able to have a movement here that can deliver a consequence so the Russians, so that the people in Iran and other places can see uniting with this movement is beneficial to them, and that's what we have to do. And you can't do that by just saying I want to join Hillary Clinton. You know, I'm trying what's in their heart. That stuff will not do it. We're gonna have to build a movement for power, and Africans are going to have to recognize that. So I'm just going to go over the basic stuff dealing with the international law governing the crime of genocide and human rights so that we can kind of be familiar with that moving forward. In 1946, the General Assembly of the United Nations gave this definition of the crime of genocide. Genocide is a denial of the rights of existence of entire human groups as homicide is a denial of the right to live of individual human beings, right? Genocide is what even the United States government said happened to Carabal on an individual label, magnified. Do you understand? Because they said that this was homicide. They're saying here, genocide, this is what the definition that the General Assembly accepted for the crime of genocide. Genocide is a denial of the right of existence of entire human groups, as homicide is the denial of the right to live of individual human beings, right? And so what we're saying is what happened to Carabal was magnified 1 million times or more in the United States. That is genocide. Such denial of the right of existence shocks the conscience of mankind, results in great losses to humanity in the form of cultural and other contributions represented by these human groups, and is contrary to moral law and to the spirit and aims of the United Nations. Many instances of such crimes of genocide have occurred when racial, religious, political, and other groups have been destroyed entirely or in part. The punishment of the crime of genocide is a matter of international concern. And so the General Assembly therefore affirms that genocide is a crime under international law, which the civilized world condemns, and for the commission of such principles and accomplices, whether private individuals, public officials, or statesmen, and whether the crime is committed on religious, racial, political, or other grounds are punishable. That's pretty inclusive of all kinds of forces. Invites the member states to enact the necessary legislation for the prevention and punishment of this crime, recommends that international cooperation be organized between states with a view to facilitating the speedy prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide, and to this end requests the Economic and Social Council to undertake the necessary studies with a view to drawing up a draft convention on the crime of genocide to be submitted to the next regular session of the General Assembly. So this is how they contextualize this whole genocide convention, and how the General Assembly stated that the United Nations would move forward. Article 2 of the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, adopted by Resolution 263 3A of the United Nations General Assembly on 9 December 1948, states, in the present convention, here we begin to define the convention, genocide according to the convention. In the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. A, killing members of the group. B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D, imposing measures intended to prevent birth within the groups. E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So that's what they say. This is the definition of genocide according to the United Nations. I mean, look at that: killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. And if you just want to take an outstanding glaring example of them poisoning the water in Flint, you know, but that's just one aspect of it. I mean, you know, imposing measures intended to prevent birth within the group. What is that? Except, you know, how do you characterize them? Well, all these Africans who are locked up in prison at just the age that they would be bringing children in the world, right? Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group, where they starve African people and then come to our communities, whether in Africa or Haiti or other places, and then buy our children, or they put them in these foster care institutions where they sell our children using other means. That's genocide. So all of these are things that we need to really look at and be able to articulate in the pursuit of this particular campaign, especially those who will be responsible for providing leadership. Then here's what's punishable. This is what's in the following act shall be punishable. Genocide, that is somebody who does what they say it defines it. Conspiracy to commit genocide, whether you do it or not, you conspire to do any of the things that we talk, that's punishable. Direct and public incitement to commit genocide. I mean, it's like a radio host saying, go assassinate Omali Yeshitela because he represents this and that for African people. Attempt to commit genocide, whether you succeed or not, to attempt to do that. And complicity in genocide, which is a whole damn white population, you know, in many ways, you know. This petition also cites violations of other conventions of international law. And then there's a mention of other conventions, and you can look into those conventions. But the main thing that we're talking about is the whole convention on the prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide. And so this is the campaign that we're going to be waging, and we are involved in waging now. This is the basis for the African Charged Genocide Winter Encampment Tour that took us from Jackson, Mississippi to Chicago to New York and Washington, D.C. over the last several days. And I wanted to just raise that. And there in this document, there are some brief examples of some historical violence toward Africans that we should be aware of. I just want to say about this document, on page 6 of 10, we keep using terms like the slave masters and stuff like that. I find that abhorrent, you know, like a slave master. That's something that sort of legitimizes a particular kind of relationship, you know. I think that we should come up with another term to explain that relationship. What is a slave master? You know, that's almost like a generic way that legitimizes this particular relationship, you know, this oppressive pig, this, you know. Anyway, so I want to go ahead and now open it up for discussion. We have about 45 minutes that we can talk about this. And if necessary, we can reference any of the documents, just as long as we can say what page numbers we're looking at, or we can reference what has been stated up to now. So I want to open it up and yes.
You have to push the button to unmute code if they want to speak.
So we are working now to go ahead and unmute folk, but you should really maintain on
All
mute.
callers are muted. All callers are unmuted.
So you should really mute yourselves until you're prepared to talk. Otherwise, it interferes with the discussion that's happening here. So I want to go ahead and open it up. Uhuru. Anybody?
Uhuru, Chairman, it's David here.
Yes, David.
I just wanted to say that this political education session did clear some things up for me as far as the role of the masses of African working class people. My question is, what would be a good way to explain to African working class people, their role in this whole revolution, as far as them giving us the support and them being, I guess, the force in showing that we are capable of governing our own affairs and showing that we are capable of holding these European powers accountable? What would be a good way to get that to the average working class person in about 5 to 10 minutes?
In about 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah. We won't do it in 5 to 10 minutes. What will happen, however, is that we're given an excellent opportunity now, better than anything I've seen over the last 40 years, Brother David. There is a growth in consciousness precisely because of the activities of the African working class. No professors, nobody who wrote conventions on genocide or anything like that created this. This was created on Canfield Drive in Ferguson by Africans who never probably thought about the United Nations, never been involved in any political discussions. All they just know the pigs were messing with them, creating all kinds of, problems for them, and they rose up against that. That's the thing that has created such a growth in consciousness of African people throughout this country, so that even you've got, well-off movie actors who talking about how badly they're treated and that they got to do something and show the dignity of Black people, et cetera, et cetera. This is because those people in Canfield Drive. And what we have to do is continue to build a kind of movement that empower them inside our movements itself. And this is where they attain the power inside our movements to begin to define this reality. That's what made this tour that we just did so powerful, in my estimation, because you had the African workers. They've never had to contend with the African workers. They never had to contend with Hodosha jacking them up straight from the working class, from Tony Taylor, who's saying right there, I am not for any kind of Black Lives Matter. I know Black Lives Matter, Black Power matters, and this is from the working class. And that's the thing that we have to just bring them in political. That's why you have that Burning Spear newspaper. That's why we're going to have to write about the masses in our newspaper and take it to them and begin to organize on the ground wherever we are located. It won't happen in 5 or 10 minutes. Sometimes it won't take longer than that, because sometimes there are many Africans who are looking right now to try to find us, to try to find some vehicle to be able to express their outrage. We have to bring the political education to them in the process. But I think Huey P. Newton was absolutely correct when he said something like it's participation and what? Observation that makes that bring the masses into a certain kind of political consciousness. Uhuru. Anyone else? I'm gonna have to call you out if you don't call yourself now. Yeah. Who is it? Okay, okay. Uhuru Gazi.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciate this report and this study. And one question that I had is that I don't have the full details on it, but I remember who's the gentleman from Black Gender Report? Glenn Ford saying something about there was some kind of reparations or something going on before, like Obama was voted in, and then when he became president, he voted against some kind of reparations that was going on in the UN?
No. What happened was, and this is the point that I made, is that during the the first time Obama ran, and during the presidential debates, the first one they held was in Harlem, New York. And some African in the audience just knew that he had something going for him, stood up and asked the position on reparations. They support reparations. And Obama came out and said no, because he felt like somehow raising up historical wrongs created divisions or something to that effect. So Obama came out, and by Obama coming out saying no, he gave permission to. You saw this, Bernie Sanders just came out and did it. Well, Obama gave everybody permission to say no, when he did that. And that was an important thing, because at the time, the reparations question was getting a lot of traction, and African people were really mobilized by it. Obama did a lot, in my view, to stall that movement, not just by that statement, but by the fact that many Africans didn't want to do anything to embarrass, undermine Obama, who they felt like was the black representative, Uhuru.
Tim.
Yes, Kamen.
Yeah, I think it's important that people know that that tribunal in '82 was only the first of 12 consecutive tribunals on reparations for black people, that traveled throughout the country to massify it. So people got to know that.
I think that's true, because the reparations movement in this country didn't just pop up. I mean, the reparation demand is an old demand, but it never was something in the possession of the people before. And there were groups and individuals who we knew who were going this to the state legislature or trying to get the United Nations to do this or that, but they never did anything beyond that. And it was the party that said, we're going to make reparations a household word. And we created an organization specifically for that purpose, the African National Reparations Organization. And that we did something like 12. Every year we had a reparations tribunal in some part of the United States. And part of that was about allowing African people to step forward and say, what is happening to us today, so that it's clear that the demand for reparations is not some old-timey thing, but something that is relevant to even at this moment. And so we created the basis for making it a live demand. And we would have demonstrations and things like that around the country. Police killing, reparations, any kind of thing that was going on. That's what our party and our movement did. Some of the people who were well known for the reparations work were people who were introduced to the question by the African People's Socialist Party in New York, even in Europe. I took the reparations tour to Europe in 1983 and introduced it to the movements there. And so we played a big role, a major role in introducing the reparations demand to the African masses. And the problem is, of course, in every instance, we create a platform for the African petty bourgeoisie due to the lack of organization of the African masses and working class. And that's what we have to fix by bringing Africans into their own revolutionary party, so that we don't create conditions that other forces can take advantage of. I was just watching a woman on television yesterday on some kind of YouTube thing, who we know quite well, who we met in England many years ago, who takes our materials and etc. And she's well respected, but she's an opponent of the party and to African internationalism. Anyway, anybody else?
Yes, Chairman.
Yeah, come again.
I wanted to contribute to the discussion on the tribunal and the significance of the way the party took the reparations demand, because not only did we do what the chairman said, but one of the things that we made a very important distinction, because up until then, reparations demand was seen as something that the petty bourgeoisie would take into some kind of legislative process. They always omitted the masses, the significance of the masses of the people to the reparations demand. And it was a party that says that until the masses of African people are won to the question of reparations, that's the only way that we can define reparation, say what reparation would be, and as opposed to the petty bourgeoisie going to, and the state had the ability to give sectors of the bourgeoisie reparations and claim that the people had got reparations. And, you know, the party was the one that made the distinction to say, no, reparation is the demand of the masses of African people, understanding and demanding reparations. And I thought it was a, very important distinction, and that's led up to us really taking it out for 12 consecutive years all around the country. And it was only after the Japanese got reparations that some of these organizations popped up and decided, okay, now we can go for reparations. And how they defined it was that, well, if you wanted a Cadillac, if some people wanted some teeth or whatever, we could all get something, from this reparation demand. So it was really narrowed,
Just let me say, related to that was the other really important contribution to this discussion about the African People's Socialist Party was prior to our involvement and for a long time afterwards, reparations was only demanded for slavery. We said that the exploitation of African people has grown immensely. It's more worse, since the end of slavery. And by just containing it to slavery, then it became something that was in the possession just of the middle class and intellectuals and things like that, historians who could talk about all the horrible things happened to us back then. But to take it out of that context and say that slavery, that reparations are due to African people, not only for slavery, but up to this very moment as we are having a discussion, then that puts it back in the possession of the people who are being affected today. To say that it's just for slavery is to make a statement that benefits people who are already more or less satisfied with their own condition. They just want something forward, but are not in the contest about what's happening in the world right now. People being gunned down and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and starved. You don't have to be gunned down. I mean, the various, if you look at just the difference in the conditions of existence, you look at the fact that Africans on average live something like 7 years less than white people. If you take the numbers of African people in this country going back for however long, and you multiply that 7 years per every individual, that's a lot of lives of African people that's being stolen, and that's not an outlandish, outstanding question, because insurance companies do this all the time in terms of being able to look at how long somebody's likely to live and the benefits of that. They actually quantify that kind of stuff. So it's much, yeah. Uhuru, anybody else? Uhuru, ¿quién es?
This is Dave.
Yes, Dave.
I just wanted to really appreciate this, the study and all the Sunday studies that we have all the time. And so before I met the movement, I had watched a documentary on reparations in Jamaica, because the Rastafarians there are like fighting for reparations. But the way that I remember them doing it is they were like writing letters to the Queen of England, and basically like, can you say something of like how they should go about doing it? Should they, also be included in this process of petitioning the UN and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, because that's, again, the whole ploy of thinking that somehow some legislator or some executive branch of some government is going to give it to us, and it's not going to happen. Reparations, first of all, has to be a function of the revolution, that the conditions of African people in Jamaica today due obviously to slavery, and so that England owes us, but also to neo-colonialism in Jamaica that continues to expropriate value from Jamaica and transport it to different kinds of banks and financial institutions and corporations and things like that at the expense of African people there. Obviously, Jamaica is a small island, and that's why it's going to be increasingly important. I mean, I think even what we've seen with the movement toward a common demand by, not AFRICOM, but CARICOM, I think is uniting to make some kind of demand. That makes sense, but for that to be effective, the African working class is going to have its own power. In Jamaica, throughout the colonies of the Americas, but in Africa itself, because every politician that's running for office needs to explain to the African masses why they are not demanding reparations for stolen labor, stolen resources, not only going back then, but even up to this point today. I think that that the Africans, the Rastafarians, who have been really some of the most outstanding forces who are trying to raise the reparations demand and trying to hold up the African identity in being persecuted and murdered by the Jamaican government itself for many, many years, that it is our responsibility to reach out to these comrades and to embrace them so that the reparations demand, I think we should, the kinds of statement I've said up to now in terms of building mass movements demanding reparation, putting pressure on the government in Jamaica around this, because they are the ones with whom the Queen, England has a formal political relationship. I think that's going to be critically important. But I think also building a movement of African people, the African Socialist International, is going to be a really critical component of raising this, so that Africans in Jamaica don't have to be standing on their own when they're making this demand for reparations. And finally, I think that we're going to have to popularize the demand for reparations in such a fashion that it becomes clear that reparations is something that is due to every living, breathing African on the planet Earth. I think that's what it has to happen, you know. Yeah.
We have a couple of questions from
say it loud enough, baby. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions from YouTube. Where will or when can we hear about the steps that have been taken with the petition thus far, or next up? Will it be presented to the UN, or can someone say more about that? That's coming from Siraj, S-E-R-A-A-J, Sadie.
Yeah. Okay. We have on I think the first month of on the anniversary of the murder of Mike Brown, which would have been August 9th, 2015, on the first anniversary. We sent to every member of the General Assembly and to the Secretary General of the United Nations this petition. And we have not heard anything from them, which is not unusual, which is why it's necessary to build like a popular mass movement around this question, and which is why we are collecting more than 1 million signatures. We want to create a situation where the reparations issue for African people is so pronounced that politicians can't ignore it. Let me just say a couple of things about that. One, the United Nations itself, I mentioned to you about how it was a shady deal, a shady operation, a fixed situation. Even the structure of the United Nations, where you have the General Assembly, which is masses of people who can participate in the General Assembly and they can vote on stuff, etc. But the real power is in the Secretariat. And the Secretariat is only comprised of a handful of different states. They can veto anything. That's the way it was created, so that a handful can veto anything that comes from the United Nations can be vetoed by the Secretariat. Secretariat, that's United States, I think Russia, Russia, what is it, China's? Now China's finally a part of the Secretariat. I think France may be a part of the Secretariat, but it's mostly white countries in China, and I don't know if Japan is a part of that now or not, but it's just a handful. And so they can have veto power of anything that comes from the United Nations. So I thought it was really important to say that. So part of what we have to do is we have to drive this campaign to get people to sign the petition, Africans Charged Genocide. Go to africanschargedgenocide.org. We need to do everything we can to get everybody we can to sign this petition. That's part of the campaign. So we did send it to them. And that's one of the reasons that we also travel with this encampment to where this working group of the United Nations was holding out. But even these forces, you know, they would say right up, well, they wouldn't say it publicly, but they would say to us that they were concerned about saying anything that the United States was going to find offensive. They didn't want to say, they're close to the State Department and things like that. That's the reality we're confronted with. So it's going to be a popular movement that does it. It's not going to be, you know, that's what it's going to take to make this happen. Uhuru. Anybody else? Uhuru. Is this David again?
Yes.
Hold off, David. Let's.
This is Mensa.
Oh, Mensa. Yes, Mensa. Go ahead.
Yes, I want to first say that, you know, we hear a lot of the Jewish Holocaust, and we hear a lot of the Reformation camps of Japanese and Japanese Americans, and their utilization in the war in World War II and the reparations that they have received. But what we must realize is that, you know, to admit that that Africans are to get reparations would be admitting that the whole U.S. was built on the backs of us, and therefore it goes totally against the state, you know. So what we have to realize is that just like our indigenous family, and just like our Chicano family, and just like our Palestinian family, who we stand in solidarity with, the state will not recognize that because it does not advance the state. Period. Point blank. So the thing is, the thing that what I want people to recognize and understand is that the documentation on reparations now that has been presented is a very concise document. The World Tribunal, the two-day World Tribunal in 1982 is still applicable to today. And what Dr. Leonard Jeffries, what the Sisters on Health give us, they are all applicable to today. But how do we take this document that is about 40 pages or so, that section that we have, and make it most digestible and popularize it to our people so that it is something that they can receive, right? Because if they read this concisely, they will see, they will understand, they will understand why reparations is completely necessary. We're talking about food deserts in the demographic where Africans live. We are talking about Planned Parenthood and institutionalization, prisoner pipeline complexes that have been built in the community. We are talking about the privatization of schools and the public institutions, which they call schools, which are prison industrial complex pipelines, which go against us. So they will not give us reparations. The United Nations will not give us reparations. We have to take the steps, and we have to take the actions and create the revolution and popularize the revolution around that, and use the laws, those laws, and use the examples of the tribunal to create that. So we just have to be really aware that this is not to their advancement. This is not in any way, shape, or form to their advancement and the state's advancement. And excuse my long-windedness. And my question is how do we take the reparations now documentation, which is about the 44 pages or so that you gave us, and pull out key points that we can make it most digestible or a pamphlet to give to other Africans and peoples that stand in solidarity with us, to make them realize and understand that reparations is a must. And it's not just extended from slavery, but it's before and it's after and it's now, and it's a continuation of the neo-colonization that is happening today.
Uhuru. Let me just say that I think that's splendid. And for a number of reasons, one of which is the continued recognition of the significance of the tribunal, because it was a powerful and, I believe, a historic event. And I think that part of what you've just done is suggest a task for the Reparations African Child Genocide Commission that's working now with the NPDUM to take this whole genocide demand forward. I think that that is a splendid suggestion that you've just made. The other thing I think is really powerful too is popularizing among the masses and making it significant. It's not just an empty thing. It's not just to give people more information, but many of African people are trapped with the narrative that suggests that Africans are living off welfare of white people. That this little pittance that Africans are getting somehow, they're doing all this stuff for us, the taxpayers, etc. When what the reparations demand does is gives us an opportunity to show that white people have been living off the welfare of black people since our first engagement. And that's the only reason that we've been kept around, because it has provided welfare for white power, white people, which is the point that Brother Mensa just made also. But the number of African people who understand this question offers a greater likelihood of African people being consciously and driven into the camp of revolutionary transformation. Because we've got all kinds of explanations. It's an opportunity for providing historical education, political education to millions of African people about our condition. Just the reparations demand itself, what's popularized and carried out in the best possible way. And it is, revolution is the only way forward. There's no other thing. And the bourgeoisie, the rulers of this country understand this also. And there is going to be a critical point in time in the struggle that the government is going to offer reparations to some Negroes, what they call reparations. And they are waiting in the wings now. There are even some sectors of the petty bourgeoisie who, when we first raised the reparations demand, wouldn't touch it. And who've written books and making a lot of money from it. I'm trying to think of the guy who wrote The Debt, the book The Debt, Randall Robinson. When we first came out, he wouldn't touch reparations. Jesse Jackson wouldn't touch, Farrakhan wouldn't touch reparations. None of them would. And there are sections of the petty bourgeoisie who are waiting in the wings now, and I bet you they got some kind of plan, give us the money, and this will come as a payoff to try to quiet the movement and put it in the hands of a certain opportunist sector of the African population. That's going to happen. Uhuru, thank you, Brother Mensah. Anybody else, quickly?
Yes,
Brother Cam.
Yes, Brother Cam.
That the brother just raised.
How's that?
And that is, even though we don't have the...
Go ahead. What are you saying? Even though we're going to have, well, you got to be quick, K-Fing.
Yeah, even though we don't have the African National Reparations Organization, but the people need a forum, and we do have that in terms of the black people's grand jury, because if you can remember, Doc Hatter, annual presented a forum for African workers to come and make their case against the U.S. government, and I think that the black people's grand jury can do the same thing. And it's documented. They're talking about expanding the document. I think that that Richard, along with the Richard Genocide Committee, that black people's grand juries to be used in that process too.
It can be used, Uhuru, but I think, yeah, all right. Cam and then somebody else was.
Uhuru,
yes.
I want to appreciate your analysis and historical overview of the United Nations as a component of these European criminals. One of the things I wanted to make a distinction on this working group of experts, the people of African descent that came. You indicated that in the 1960s and 70s in the anti-colonial movement that the international law began to change in some ways, where we were able to contribute to people of African descent and colonized people were able to contribute to the body of international law that was developing. In 2001, the World Conference Against Racism was a major game changer in international law, where the people of the international community stated that this global world order was a result of a crime, that the current state of the planet is a result of a major crime by Europeans, and that people of African descent suffer more. And so coming out of that conference, they created a working group of experts on people of African descent to deal with the issues that people who were stolen from Africa face, primarily just people who were stolen from Africa, not Africans on the continent. And one of the things they created, that they initiated, was the International Year of People of African Descent in 2011, that they said that the world must issues of people of African descent, those in the diaspora, because we still suffer horrendously from those original crimes. And they found out that that year was not enough, and then they organized, they said that we needed a decade to focus on that. And so that decade is 2015 to 2024. And during this time, the working group of experts are supposed to travel around to different countries and do country visits to ascertain from the people what is going on in their particular state. And so when they came here, they were working for us, this particular group. And I'm not talking about the other groups, but this particular group was working for us. And what they were able to do was to hear our voices, as you stated, the working class voices. And they put out a document that reveals what we said. They spoke in our voice. It's a document that we can use to advance
to advance our cause, our various causes, and that we can put out there in the international arena, because now the international world has a document of our voice on what's going on in America. So it's a tool. It's not it can force America to do anything. It is a tool, as you stated. And one of the things I want to congratulate Hadosha and the cabinet piece, and which concluded in her question to the working group, that African charged genocide, and she wanted to make sure that that was known. And the experts stated, yes, they tried to shy away from the question, but what he stated was, and I thought it was a great answer, was that this opens the conversation. This document, the way they recorded our statements, it opens the conversation on a global level. And then the African charged genocide must, continue that conversation. I just wanted to put that out so we know that the UN has several organs, as you stated, the Security Council, the General Assembly, and the Human Rights Commission. And it's through the Human Rights Commission that we're utilizing as a tool to advance our work.
Uhuru, let me just, I want to really appreciate what Cam just brought here, because part of what we recognize in the party is that we call this uneasy equilibrium, that there is a change of balance of forces happening in the whole world. And that is reflected also in the struggles that the political struggles that you see happening even within the context of the United Nations. I thought Durban, that whole thing in Durban was powerful to the extent, as we know, that the US government refused to participate, Israel refused to participate. I think Canada only sent some meaningless representative there, but it was a major turning point. And I think if it had not been for the 9/11 event that came about just a few days, 3 or 4 days after that, it would have been a major ideological and political blow to imperialist white power in the whole world. I thought it was extremely powerful. And so I want to unite with what Cam has just said. But what it does is arms us. I think that people need to know. Most Africans don't even know about Durban and the consequences of Durban. I have been terribly ignorant of it myself. And I think that we have to really help people to understand what came out of Durban and the participation of masses of people and what just came out of this thing and our participation in it in terms of the working group of experts on African descent. I think that was really important. We have to popularize that on. And the other thing that's most critical is see it as a tool to advance the revolution and raising the consciousness and helping to take people out of this perception that U.S. law is all this, and that if there is law, that U.S. law is actually technically subordinate to international law. Except, as we know, the ones got the guns make the determination of what's legal at the moment. But what we're doing is arming people right now, so that right now we are outgunned and outnumbered. But that's a temporary feature of political life. And we arm people with consciousness and the historical context of our oppression, give them that arm, and other things will follow. There was a sister who was about to say something before, who got interrupted, and we're going to have to end it shortly.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
It's 4 feet.
Foots.
Hey, listen, I want to know what's next.
Well, part of what's next is Comrade President Hadosha will be explaining some of the what next, and then she's got a commission that's responsible for organizing the African charged genocide work that NPDUM is going to be taking on. I think is really important. Of course, we have to really push this drive to get the 1 million signatures, but I anticipate we'll be having mobilizations at the United Nations and various other kinds of places. We're going to have to educate masses about people, like we said before. You got people who are struggling, trying to get enough food to eat and dealing with what's happening to the children in the schools and police, terror in the community. It's hard for people sometimes, ordinary people, to see the significance of going and participating in a conference or a discussion on Africans charged genocide. That's the responsibility of organizers on the street. That we have to, win that on the streets and bring people to more political activity. And instruments like the one that you have possession of, your radio, we got to be on the radio talking about it, using every instrument at our command. But in final analysis, it's going to be the power of the people. It's going to have to be demonstrations, mobilizations, starting small. I'm sure they will start relatively small. It's been difficult for us to break through this kind of, there are about 6 corporations that control 90% of what the world gets through media. 6 corporations control that. So we're breaking out of that. They don't want anybody to hear this discussion. They'd rather have you with your hands up saying, don't shoot, or Black Lives Matter. This is what we are contesting with right now. So we have to use every vehicle that we have at our command to make it known. Uhuru. And the more we influence the masses and educate the masses of people, the more the white media is going to have to find a way to get to us, because they want to control the narrative, and they know everybody else believe what we believe. Then they're going to have to jump in the mix somehow or another. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, like?
Uhuru, Chairman.
Yes, like.
Yeah, I just want to really appreciate the study, and I really appreciate your mention of the burning spear's importance in this campaign. I wanted to make a few suggestions to hear your thoughts about them. I think that Africans charged genocide should appear on the front page of the Burning Spear newspaper, at least until we get our millions of signatures. I think it would be prudent of us to figure out how to put that on our front page until we get our million signatures. I also think that our writers should find a way to, when possible and appropriate, tailor their stories to boost and promote their campaign. Much like preachers, although they tell different stories, they always kind of lead to the cross, at least in Baptist churches. I think those things are like the slogans that are placed at the end of stories, what have you, should always take our readers back to this campaign and the importance of them being involved. So just wanted to throw those couple of suggestions out there, hear your thoughts on it, and
I think they're good ideas. We really have to look at that. I think they're both good ideas, splendid ideas. And we have about 5 minutes left. No, we got 2 minutes for any other, 1 minute for any other discussion. Then we're going to announcements, etc. Is there anything else from anybody? Only got a minute.
Sis.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, sis. Go ahead, sis.
This is Angelica.
Yes, Angelica.
I appreciate this conversation that we're having, and I think another way of reaching our younger masses will be to go through the high school. It's a lot of young people that's there that's definitely having total contradictions with what's going on in the outside world and inside of the school system as well. And I think bringing them to the political life through African charged genocide would be an incredible opportunity and experience.
Thank you so much. Gazi?
Everybody.
Or was it Gazi who I'm going to come? Tell me something.
One thing I wanted to do was to get whoever came on the phone. There are people that came on that have not participated in any roll call. If you have not participated in any roll call, I need to get your name right now. Just take a few minutes to do that.
Someone who has not said your name, quickly, because we're going to end this at in 6 minutes.
Jordan Xavier out of San Diego.
Jordan Geiger, Xavier out of Xavier Chimarenga. Jordan Xavier Chimarenga.
Anybody else?
Who?
Taylor Mark from Chicago.
Okay.
Uhuru from Washington, D.C.
Uhuru. Yeah.
Hadia. And who was the next person?
I said Sophie.
Foots. Okay.
Uhuru Trayvon.
Sarah, was that Sarah?
All right, anybody else?
Okay.
We gotta move it. Gazi, Uhuru.
Uhuru, everybody. I have a lot of announcements to go through, but they're very important, so bear with me. All right, first announcement is to continue, your political education and to attain some of the literature that we have, which is One Africa, One Nation, An Uneasy Equilibrium, and also my favorite quotations from Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Please go to burningspearmarketplace.com, burningspearmarketplace.com. Uhuru. The next announcement is coming from Day Steer, who represents the Burning Spear newspaper. And her announcement is the Burning Spear newspaper will be holding its monthly sum up meeting on Wednesday, February 3rd, 2016. This meeting will go over February Spear and outline the wins and contradictions. All Spear production teams members are required to participate in this meeting. Those who are interested in proofreading, copy editing, illustrating, and distribution of the Spear are also invited to call into the meeting. To get the information on this call, please email Daysteer at daysteer88@gmail.com. One more time.
Steer, S-T-E-E-R.
Yes, DAYSTEER88@gmail.com.
Hello, I think we got.
What?
Uhuru.
What?
Neighbor, this is Sophie, St. Louis.
Can y'all hear
Hey,
me?
Sophie, this is Vanetta. Hey, Vanetta.
Still on the line too.
Hold on,
Did we get you put off?
Maybe the time ran out.
Can somebody in the meantime go back on?
Can y'all hear? Can you hear?
Uhuru.
Can somebody go to the call?
605.
1605?
No, 605. 562.
562?
3130. 6. All right, when it come on, it'll be code 665-108.
You have to wait. She takes a while before she answers every time.
Is it on?
Welcome. This service is provided by freeconferencecall.com. Please enter your access code followed by the pound sign.
665.
You entered 6651. If this is correct, press 1. To re-act, please enter your access code followed by the pound sign. You entered 665. There are 20 participants in this conference. This conference is being recorded. Muted.
We've been muted.
Uhuru.
Uhuru, unmute is *5.
Star 5 twice.
No, *5.
Star 5 twice.
Oh, we having some.
Uhuru.
Oh, we're not the host. That's not the host code.
Can somebody just go, use your cell phone or something while this is going on?
Yeah.
Let's do 8-1-6-2-3-1-2-0.
My phone is dead.
And then wait.
Dang.
Over the time.
281.
Welcome. This service is provided by freeconferencecall.com. Please enter your access. You entered 281640. If this is correct, press 1. 2. There are 16 participants in this conference. This conference is being recorded.
Uhuru.
Please announce yourself.
Uhuru, this is Ghazi at headquarters. Uhuru.
They're muted.
Okay.
Are we muted?
Can I unmute them?
We're not muted, but
It
they're
didn't say
muted.
them.
How do I unmute them?
Star 5.
twice.
All callers are unmuted.
Uhuru.
This is Lisa, I can hear you.
Uhuru, comrade.
Uhuru, comrades. All right, we're back.
Yeah.
Uhuru.
Go ahead, guys.
Can everyone hear me?
Uhuru, I can, Gazi.
All right. Thank you, Mike Love. Uhuru. All right. I'll begin from the beginning. The first announcement is from the Burning Spear. The Burning Spear newspaper will be holding its monthly sum up meeting on Wednesday, February 3rd, 2016. This meeting will go over February SPEAR and outline the wins and the contradictions. All SPEAR production team members are required to participate in this meeting. Those who are interested in proofreading, copy editing, illustrating, and distributing the SPEAR are also invited to call into the meeting. To get information on the call, please email Daysteer at DAYSTEER, the number 8 at gmail.com. Daysteer88@gmail.com. The next announcement is coming from the Office of the Secretary General. We are having our Sunday meeting, Sunday meeting at 4 p.m. that will be about the sum up on this exciting genocide encampment tour that was just completed. The meeting will also be live streamed at uhurunews.com.
That's 4 Eastern time.
4 p.m. Eastern time. The next announcement is coming from the Office of the Deputy Chair. All right, in Oakland, California, the African People's Education and Defense Fund will be having planning an event to build the April 16th Health is Freedom Health Fair this Sunday, January 31st at 1 p.m. at the Uhuru House/Aquaba Hall in Oakland, California. We encourage anyone interested in helping to build this health fair to come at 12:30 and get some refreshments, meet and greet. Then at 1 p.m., get right to business. In Philadelphia, join the team to build the One Africa, One Nation Uhuru Health Festival and Flea Market. Upcoming community meetings, Wednesday, January 27th, 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m., Wednesday, February 10th, 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m., Wednesday, February 24th, 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. Meetings are held at Uhuru Furniture and Collectibles. The address is 832 North Broad Street, second floor. You can call for more information at 215-546-9616. 215-546-9616. Aquaba Hall and Uhuru Jiko. If you have a birthday, anniversary, retirement, wedding reception, or just want to hold an event or a class and looking for a beautiful venue in Oakland, California, or St. Petersburg, Florida, go to apedf.org, and check out our Aquaba Banquet Hall that also includes a licensed community commercial kitchen. Uhuru Jiko in St. Petersburg, Florida. You can call 727-821-2437. 727-821-2437, our national office. Ask for Rachel and she will be glad to assist you. The Tyrone Lewis Community Gym is looking for volunteers to help with our Kids Fit Camp program in St. Petersburg, Florida. Please join us every Saturday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. helping kids understand the importance of being healthy and active. Call 727-824-5670, 727-824-5670, and ask for John, the gym manager. Next announcement is coming from the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. USM has all the diamonds event.
All diamonds or blood diamonds?
Okay, the USM is having an all diamonds or blood diamonds event on February 17th at Aquaba Hall. Jesse, please. Who can they contact?
That's okay. They can go to, we'll get the word out.
Okay. The word will be out on that soon. The next announcement is coming from All African People's Development, an empowerment project, is organizing a speed dating social and fundraiser for the opening of our first economic institution, Zenzele Consignment. The fundraiser will be on Friday, February 12th at 8 p.m. at the Lotus Lounge in Huntsville, Alabama. To register or for more information, please go to www.nfitmatch speed dating speeddating.blogspot.com. It's basically infinity match speed dating.blogspot.com. Instead, don't type in IN, just use N, the letter N for infinity. Second announcement, AAPDEP is also actively seeking to recruit Africans with graphic design, social media, and marketing and promotion skills to join our Zenzele consignment team. If interested, please send an email to info@zenzeleconsignment.com, info@zenzeleconsignment.com. Next announcement, which is the last announcement, is coming from the African National Women's Organization led by Yeshitela Orunmila. Uhuru, ANWO is calling on African women to join the African National Women's Organization. We need forces to help organize with us on the current campaigns. 1, to protect the economic autonomy of poor and working class African hair braiders with our African Ancestral Braiding Freedom Campaign. 2, Black Women in Black is an subcommittee of organized mothers and sisters in defense of their loved ones murdered by colonial violence. If you are interested, you should go to their website at anwouhuru.org, ANWOUHURU.org, and or email them at info@anwouhuru.org. We also have another announcement from Herdosha Bentham to make sure, our president, Herdosha Bentham of Impedum, to make sure to go to africanschargedgenocide.org and to sign the Africans Charged Genocide petition, which is what this whole thing was about. And also, if you are interested in joining the African People's Socialist Party, please go to www.joinapsp.org and fill out the recruit form. Uhuru. Any more announcements, Chairman?
That's it.
Uhuru.
Uhuru comrades, we'll be getting back with you shortly in terms of what we'll be dealing with in the next study. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Did somebody have the ways in?